We'll begin with this Fox News alert. The case of the Trump-Russia dossier is heating up, with Democrats maybe in trouble. We now know top members of the Democratic Party denied knowing anything about payments made to the firm behind the research. So did they tell the truth when they spoke to congressional investigators about it? You know, making false statements to Congress is against the law. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here today from the Fox Business Network. Dagan McDowell, editor of townhall.com, Katie Pavlich, former deputy spokesperson for the State Department, Marie Harf, and today's hashtag One Lucky Guy, actor and director superstar, Kevin Sorbo. And he's out with a brand new film today, Let There Be Light. We're going to hear about that later, but right now, let there be Kevin, Outnumbered.
How are you?
I'm great. Better now that you're here.
It's good that I'm here. I'm glad. It's been a while, so I'm good to be back. I love the new digs. This is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, we did this for you.
Thank you.
And he brought his lovely wife, Sam.
I said upgrade the budget. Yes, my wife's right over there. She actually co-wrote the script, the movie that we shot. So.
Oh, excellent. Well, congrats to both of you. We'll talk about it in detail a little bit later. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, new details surrounding that dossier on Donald Trump and Russia. We know Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC helped fund the work that went into creating it. But now we also know Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, and former DNC chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, both privately told congressional Russia investigators they did not know about any agreement to pay Fusion GPS for opposition research on Donald J. Trump. They gave those interviews before the news broke this week that the Clinton campaign and DNC were behind some of the payments. Watch what White House counselor Kellyanne Conway told Bret Baier last night on Special Report.
The last time a party spent several $1 million and couldn't figure out whether or not they paid a foreign national to dig up dirt on their opponent, that just doesn't happen. That's not going to pass the smell test for many Americans, but we'll let the investigators do their job. We just find it to be curious and ironic.
Meanwhile, Mark Elias, who worked for the law firm that hired Fusion GPS, was actually sitting next to Podesta when he was interviewed by lawmakers. Former CIA Director Leon Panetta, who once served as White House Chief of Staff for Bill Clinton, was asked about it.
It certainly makes the situation very awkward. If you're testifying and saying you have no knowledge and the attorney sitting next to you is one of those that knew what was involved here, I think it does raise an issue that the committee is going to have to look at and determine just exactly who knew what. What we can't do here is lose sight of the fundamental objective of this investigation, which is to look at what the Russians did, how did they get about it, and what can we do to prevent it from happening again.
The FBI is expected to hand over documents related to the dossier by next week. Let me just put a fine point on who we were just hearing from, Kevin. Leon Panetta, also defense secretary in the Obama era. And he's saying this needs to be looked into.
You know, it's interesting to me. It's like, how gullible do you think the American people are? And to me, it's like a Hogan's Heroes episode. This is like Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing, I see nothing. And that's what they're doing out there. I mean, it seems to me everything that the Democrats, whatever they want to put onto the Republican Party is really a boomerang effect. It really comes back to them, that they're the ones really behind all this, but they want to deflect it to a different order.
Not me. What about you?
What about you? That's right.
Katie?
Well, look, Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been asked a lot of questions by congressional investigators, but I want to know when Bob Mueller, the special counsel, is going to start asking Hillary Clinton, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, John Podesta, Brian Fallon, all of the people involved in this research, what was the deal here?
Republicans who initially funded it too.
But that was completely different in the sense of what was asked. Yes, we actually should clarify this. This firm was hired by a Republican who has not been named yet to do work completely separate from Russia.
Trump, though.
Right, but it was not like they were hiring a foreign spy to do the work, which is exactly what they did here. So the question is going to become...
Yeah, there's a spy in this story.
Right, if Democrats are going to accuse the Trump campaign, which they have been for months, of colluding with the foreign government to influence the election when they did exactly that by giving them $9 million. There was all this outrage over the last couple of weeks about Facebook ads that were bought by the Russians for $100,000, and you're telling me that Hillary Clinton doesn't know that they spent a significant amount of money to get this dossier? And that she didn't talk about it on the campaign trail?
Dagan, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Marie, but I saw
No,
the
I actually
clip
want
that
you to.
did. I saw the clip that you did.
I would
and
love
wonder
for you to.
Other Democrats are going to do this. Did you catch it?
That's the flip that I was sitting at the DNC in Philadelphia, and I saw that flip happen when those emails were leaked about Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the Democrats, the DNC, talking trash about Bernie Sanders and basically trying to rig the nomination for Hillary Clinton. That day, boom. The Democrats took that narrative from Russia and turned it on its head and made it about Trump and Russia. When, in fact, this past week, we have found out that the Democrats paid Russia.
No,
and
that's
Russia,
not true.
Through an intermediary,
That's
they were paying Russia to compile a dossier on a presidential candidate. If that ain't collusion, I don't know what is.
And we also saw this week the news that the Trump campaign arm that did their data, Cambridge Analytica, reached out to Julian Assange and asked for WikiLeaks' help in dumping Hillary's emails. Julian Assange is an enemy of the United States government. He is dangerous to our national security. So there are a lot of threads we need to pull on this. I actually believe that the Clinton campaign and the DNC could have been so poorly run that they did not know about this contract. I have no idea. We don't have evidence yet. Everyone on the other side of the aisle throughout this Russia investigation said to me, we can't make assumptions. We need to wait for evidence. I would say that's true here, too. But Leon Panetta is right that the bigger point, this is all part of a bigger investigation and the intelligence community has been clear that the Russians interfered in our election. We all agree that's a problem, and that their stated goal was to help Donald Trump. Everything else that's what the intelligence community said.
There are so many unanswered questions that the American people. How about this dossier funded by Democrats trigger the FBI probe of the Trump campaign?
It was not part of the IC assessment.
I want to go back to two basic principles
which
here.
I think is important.
Let's unpack it kind of in time here, chronologically. So first of all, you brought up you're not quite buying that the DNC and that Hillary Clinton might not have known that millions of dollars were.
I absolutely buy that they didn't know.
Saying they were
you think they really didn't know?
I think there's a serious possibility that they didn't.
If they told Congress they didn't, that's illegal. So we will be looking into that. And as Leon Panetta has said, we need to be looking into that.
Sure.
But also there's this issue of who the Russians really might have backed. How about they're just on their own side?
Well,
and that's a problem that we all should work towards.
But you're questioning the intelligence community assessment. The intelligence community, which is nonpartisan. I worked at the CIA for 6 years.
Of course, hooey, it's nonpartisan.
It is completely nonpartisan, and their assessment is still under this administration that the Russians interfered, and their goal was to defeat Hillary Clinton.
That's a huge distraction from
that assessment didn't take this dossier into account in any way, shape, or form.
I know I'm outnumbered here, but unfortunately, collusion,
I'm actually usually the one that's outnumbered.
collusion isn't against the law, right? Which is unfortunate. But you mentioned $9 million. I could have made 3 really good movies with good messages for $9 million.
Well,
and not wasted with taxpayers' money.
We're getting buried in the weeds here with what the intelligence community assessed, and we do know that Russia wants to interfere in all kinds of ways. There's plenty of evidence on both sides to show that they didn't take a position necessarily. But the issue here is that Hillary Clinton and the campaign for months denied having anything to do with this dossier, which is the core issue here. We can talk all about what we've been talking about for 9 months, but the issue here is that they denied it, and now their handprints are all over it. And if the FBI is going to have a special counsel investigating, or the Justice Department rather, investigating the Trump campaign, when there's far more evidence now of the Clinton campaign, whether it's colluding with the Ukraine government in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. embassy to undermine the president, whether it's now them having their fingerprints all over this dossier and paying $9 million to make it happen. And for Hillary to say that she didn't know about it, if you go back to the debates in October of 2016, she's talking about this narrative and attacking the candidate, Donald Trump at the time, for this exact thing.
And we know that from some of those emails, which were handed over, not leaked, because there were several different batches of emails, right? So what you're talking about is either there was some untoward behavior, because you're right, collusion isn't the crime. It would be lying to Congress if, in fact, they're lying about the fact that they
lied to the special counsel? illegal? That's the question.
You know what is a crime? I mean, there are myriad crimes potentially in this. Fusion GPS should have been listed as a vendor in the campaign finance filings. It was not. Who signed off on those bills that the law firm paid to Fusion GPS? We don't know that yet. We don't know what's in those bank records from Fusion GPS because they filed a lawsuit to prevent subpoenas of those records. That happened a week ago.
That's what Jason Chaffetz says they should be fighting about now, because when he was in Congress, that was his focus.
Willful evasion on those campaign finance filings, that's a criminal act.
They totally buried it under a different name so they wouldn't get caught doing it.
Bob Mueller is looking at overall how Russia interfered in our election, how they were able to do that, and whether there were Americans of any political stripe who helped them.
We need to ask if Bob Mueller should be fired. He is best buddies with Jim Comey, and Jim Comey, did he use that?
He is very well respected.
I don't care. Did Jim Comey use that dossier to trigger wiretaps on the Trump campaign?
A lot of questions we're going to get answered.
And the names got unmasked and that as they did their snooping, so on and so forth. Last word to you.
Last word to me, I know nothing, I see nothing. It seems to be everybody on both sides of the political aisle do quite a bit of that, and it's unfortunate.
All right, here we go. It looks like President Trump is scoring big on his culture war with the NFL players, who have been taking a knee during playing of the national anthem at games. The new Fox poll shows the league's favorable rating has dropped. What does this say about President Trump's influence over his base? And an apology from the IRS over the Tea Party targeting scandal. The Justice Department has announced it has reached a settlement on behalf of the conservative groups that claimed they were treated unfairly because of their political beliefs. Will anyone face any consequences? Stay with us.
All of those conservatives, all of those independents who still want to teach their kids about an America that won, and heard from groups and donors who were...
The IRS apologizing over that Tea Party targeting scandal that happened under the Obama administration. The apology comes as the Justice Department is announcing it reached a settlement with conservative groups that claim the IRS unfairly targeted them based on their political leanings. Now the IRS admits it was wrong. According to court documents, the agency says, quote, the IRS admits that its treatment of plaintiffs during the tax-exempt determination process was wrong. For such treatment, the IRS expresses its sincere apology. Meantime, it looks like lawyers in one of the class action suits filed by hundreds of groups against the agency reportedly found the smoking gun in this scandal. An email written in 2011 from an official in the agency's exempt organizations division, obtained by the Washington Times, says this: these cases are held back primarily because of their political party affiliation, rather than specifically any political activities. Katie, I want to go to you first on this because we still, people's have really not paid the price. It's, in fact, essentially the American taxpayers that are paying for the IRS wrongdoing. And Lois Lerner is still wandering around out there.
Yeah, with a full pension and her full retirement. You know, look, settlements are great. It's good that this Justice Department is trying to put this to bed, but where is the mechanism to make sure that it doesn't happen again? The IRS admitted that they did this, and yet not a single person was charged with the crime, despite the IRS sharing confidential taxpayer information with the Justice Department, which is illegal. If you go back and read the emails, it was DOJ, too, that was colluding with the IRS to go after these groups. And I just want to remind everybody, when we talk about groups, it seems like this, abstract thing. These were individual Americans, regular, everyday Americans, moms, dads, grandparents who wanted to get involved in their democracy, and they were punished to protect Barack Obama through the most powerful agency in the country, and yet nobody was held accountable for it, and that is a shame.
Well, the Treasury Department Inspector General actually did look into this, and they found, yes, that conservative groups were unfairly targeted. They also found that progressive groups were unfairly targeted, not at the same number, but they found there was a lot of improper political targeting across the board. Neither is okay, neither is right. There's a new IRS commissioner that's going to be coming in, and hopefully he will be able to fix this. And this DOJ looked back at whether they could prosecute people from the previous administration and decided they couldn't.
Because DOJ was involved. That's why.
The Trump
and the thing is, there are no smoking gun emails from anybody specifically saying we are targeting
So let me
liberal
get this
groups
straight.
because they
I
are
want to
liberal.
try to understand what you're saying, Maria. So you're saying that because there were some progressive groups, a very small few, a very small number comparatively to the Tea Party group,
Smaller,
that were
but it's
targeted.
Still not okay.
Right, no.
Well,
I just want to understand this.
Right.
And because of that, there should be, you're going to leave Koskinen. You're going to leave people in their jobs.
Koskinen actually is being replaced.
Well, now
right
he
now.
is. But during this time, I know, finally.
So my point.
During this time,
No.
let me finish. You spoke.
Yeah.
During this time, so what you're saying is that that we shouldn't look back and make this right?
Absolutely not, Harris. What I'm saying is, yes, there were conservative groups unfairly targeted. It turns out the IRS was also unfairly targeting progressive groups. And
so you should be in the streets.
Let me finish now. And we
hanging the sign saying, let's go get this done.
We as Americans should be concerned by both, not just the side that our own political party happened to them. We should be concerned
why there has
about
to be consequences for what happened.
Yeah, exactly. There needs to be
This isn't just about conservatives.
You're just giving more evidence of why there need to be consequences.
This is about the IRS going after political organizations because of their organizations because of their.
I need to point this out. Jim Jordan, Congressman, Republican, Ohio, said that conservative groups made up a far larger portion of the target.
Once again, this shows.
Groups shouldn't be targeted either, right?
Yeah, but once again, this just shows where our tax dollars being spent by our government. And you've heard of black and white fever, like a police car pulls up behind you and you get nervous. Well, the IRS wields so much power. Look, I'd rather have my tax dollars. I'd rather have 4 stealth bombers flying over before the Rose Bowl game. I'd rather have the tax dollars spent that way than the way they do it, because it's just such a waste of time and money, and they intimidate us. They do. They intimidate us.
Right.
And to me, it's time to go back to Steve Forbes, go back to the fair, flat tax they talked about, and get rid of the IRS.
Yeah, well, let's not forget how the IRS chose the conservative groups that they were targeting. Yes, there was a handful comparatively to 500 conservative groups that were targeted. They looked for words like patriot, Tea Party, Constitution, and they went after these individual American citizens with extensive power, and they went after them with potentially perjury charges after they made them fill out 400 pages of questionnaires
but do you agree
about
that liberals should have been
who was coming
too?
to their meetings,
but you're changing
what
the
they were
subject,
saying
the
in their
settlement
meetings.
was with Tea Party groups.
Right.
The large.
Sure, but the problem is broader.
But that is exactly my point.
The problem is broader.
I'm going to finish this. To your point, the problem is the power that the IRS has, that they can freeze your bank account because they feel like it. They can go and look in the windows of your home to see if your furniture matches the income that you're reporting. Just
and under Barack Obama, they got tied to health care.
That gets an amen.
Well, look, there were no consequences for anybody, whether you're liberal or conservative. This can happen again, and that is where Congress needs to step in and hold somebody accountable and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Thank you, Katie. No blank check. Why some Republicans voicing concerns about the funding for Bob Mueller's Russia probes and whether it must be open-ended. Valid concerns about a witch hunt, or should the special counsel have a long leash? Plus, fundraising fail. Why big donors reportedly refusing to write checks to the DNC. What this is about, and whether it reflects deep discord in the Democratic Party. We debate.
Happy Friday. Republicans are losing their patience with the pace of the House Intelligence Committee's investigation into Moscow's meddling. They say it's dragging on too long. The panel announced its investigation into Russia's election interference in January. 10 months later now, it's digging for information, much to the frustration of members who believe it may have reached a saturation point, and it's just spinning its wheels. And it looks like the Republican leading the Russia review, Congressman Mike Conway of Texas, has heard this message loud and clear. He says he intends to wrap up the investigation, quote, as soon as I can. Meanwhile, some Republicans say they want to know how much Robert Mueller's Russia probe is costing, saying they won't rubber stamp endless taxpayer dollars. Representative Steve King of Iowa says, quote, for them to say to us, vote for an open-ended appropriation into a Mueller witch hunt, I think you'll see a significant objection there. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, once again, let me go back to that taxpayers' money. It's just a waste of time. I mean, really, enough is enough. It's time to move on with this thing. To me, I say clean out the people who started this whole witch hunt to begin with. They tried to paint Trump red when they really just got red on themselves, and that's what's going on with this witch hunt that's been going on.
Dagan?
I think now that we know, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, now that we know that this Trump dossier was funded by the DNC and people and the Hillary Clinton campaign, that's a reason for the Republicans to say, hey, we need to focus on this. That it's time. I think that the issue is maybe not the money, but the person who is the special counsel, which is something I brought up in the beginning of this. There deserves to be an accounting, and there will be a revelation about how much money is being spent. But I think this covers a lot of ground. I mean, this even goes into the unmasking of Americans and how that traces back to this phony dossier, what the FBI knew, and how it progressed.
You mean when they had their listening in at foreign nationals and Trump Tower and how we get Americans scooped up in that?
That Kimberly Strassel actually writes about this today, that if the Steele dossier reports dating back to June of last year were making their way into the hands of senior DNC and Clinton political operatives, you can bet they were making their way to the Obama White House. This may explain why Obama political appointees began monitoring the Trump campaign and abusing the unmasking. That needs to be looked at, too.
So for anybody just kind of stepping in on their lunch hour, Christopher Steele is that British spy who was hired to kind of do the scooping up of information for this dossier. Katie?
The Hill staffers who I've talked to who are working on this say that they just feel at this point it's a bit of a waste of time. Everybody agrees that the intelligence community has said Russia likes to interfere in elections, whether it's buying ads or trying to stir up dysfunction within the country, whether it's in Europe or in the United States. And beyond that, we really haven't gotten anywhere with the original accusation of the Trump campaign colluding with Russians to win an election. And so at the end, and I've said this before, of all these investigations, there's going to have to be a reconciling of the facts. What does the House investigation show? What does the Senate intelligence investigation show? And what does the special counsel investigation show? And where do we line up the facts on all three of those investigations?
So when do we get to that point? Because Dagan brings up a good point. It shouldn't be about the money. It should be finding out, who tried to mess with us and can we prevent it from happening again. But nothing gets anybody's attention like cash, like taxpayer cash. I mean, you have Kevin. I mean, that's been your point. Look, where do we stop spending the money on this and just say, we know what we think we can find out. Let's deal with that. Let's keep this from happening again.
Well, the second thing you just said was the key to me. One of the places I think Congress can play a helpful role and that Bob Mueller is not doing is giving some recommendations for how to prevent it from happening again, right, to any party.
You know who said that? And Attorney General Jeff Sessions when he was on the Hill for the last
and when he
time
said
they talked with him.
DOJ doesn't have people working on that right now, which was a stunning admission that I actually was surprised didn't get more coverage. But, the congressional committees have taken a little bit of a back role compared to what Bob Mueller is doing. He's the game in town. But there is a role for them to play. Don't prematurely end this because you think it's just a witch hunt. This is a serious issue across the political spectrum. Come up with some recommendations
but
and
do you
ask
have to
the
have
administration
it at this
to implement
level?
that.
I think is a point.
Yes.
Do you need multiple investigations? Spending so much money, and we are going to get that price tag eventually because that will become public knowledge.
We had dozens of congressional investigations into Benghazi, Clinton emails, everything under the sun that Hillary Clinton ever did at the State Department. I'm not saying those were all wrong to be undertaken, but congressional investigations happen all the time for every reason. Lord, we have only two, into Russia interfering in our election. That, to me, doesn't seem like too high of a bar.
Well, and I think everyone's asking what can be done, and actually states run elections, and if you look at the state level, they are the ones who are doing things to prevent this from happening and any kind of interference from a local level in their own cyber protection. So move on to a different topic. New fallout for the DNC over a lack of fundraising, political reporting that some Democratic donors are flat out refusing to write any checks until they see proof of a viable strategy moving forward. This causing concern among party insiders who are worried they could end up seriously outgunned in 2018 by the GOP. GOP Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel saying Democrats only have themselves to blame.
The DNC is still dealing with the division and the debacle of 2016, with Bernie Sanders recognizing that they had put their thumb on the scale for Hillary Clinton. They had put the primaries in place and they put the debates in place to benefit one candidate. And Bernie Sanders supporters have said, no, hands off. We're not going to support the DNC.
Yeah, and the dollars and the cents tell the story. So far this year, the RNC has raised more than double the DNC, and the RNC has more than 5 times the cash on hand and no debt compared to nearly $4 million in the red column for the Democrats. So, Marie, how is this going to work?
Well, it's interesting. The DNC is clearly struggling. I think rightly so, because I, as a Democrat, feel like they don't exactly know what they're doing. But what's interesting is individual candidates are having historic fundraising total so far. Let me just read you one statistic. At least 162 Democratic candidates in 82 GOP-held districts have raised over $100,000. That is way ahead of what the GOP candidates did, for example, in 2010, when there was this huge wave election. It's way ahead of where we were in 14 or 16. So individual
candidates... But isn't that kind of normal when you're not in the majority?
No, it's way ahead of what happened to the Republicans in 2010 when they weren't in the majority either. All I'm saying is, I think Republicans would be unwise to just look at the DNC fundraising numbers and think there's not a lot of support and energy.
But they have their candidate in the office right now, and he didn't have to spin the way Democrats had to spin to lose.
Money doesn't tell a whole story.
It doesn't, but Democratic candidates are outraising their Republicans in historic ways right now at an individual level.
Kevin, you know about money.
Well,
any advice for the Democrats?
Well, you know what? I think once again that the Democrat Party shows how corrupt they really are, because they don't even back the people that support them. Because during the last election, where did they tip the scales? So they tipped it towards Hillary. They let Bernie out there, and they left a lot of their base very upset because a lot of people wanted Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And that's where their money was supposed to go. If you go back to 2012, when the DNC party took their platform, took God out of the platform, right? They said we're going to take God out. There wasn't a backlash for the people attending the DNC, but from their constituency, the people that vote for them in Middle America and everywhere else, they went crazy, and eventually they said, okay, we're going to bring it back now.
Yeah, Dagan, Barack Obama, when he ran in 2008 and 2012, had an amazing infrastructure that did not show up for Hillary Clinton. These people aren't writing checks because they don't feel like there's a game plan. Do you think that Obama could come back? Because we've seen him on the campaign trail in Virginia.
Oh, we can talk about that. But President Obama didn't get Hillary Clinton elected to the presidency. Michelle Obama didn't help, despite that fantastic speech that she gave at the DNC. They hit the ground for her, and it didn't help. Again, it comes back to the candidate. Do these candidates, even on an individual basis, do they have a message that resonates with people in this country about their financial livelihoods? Yep. Because they will argue in favor of keeping Obamacare in place. They will argue in favor of a $15 minimum wage, which we know now does not resonate with people, and they still don't have a message on the economy.
Well, you saw what Hillary just recently just said. The Republican Party is imploding on itself. It's like, you know, I know you are, but what am I? It's that kind of mentality, because it's deflection once again.
Does Tom Perez survive?
One thing
That's
I
the
would
question.
say about the DNC most recently, though, is the Saturday night massacre of those who backed both Bernie Sanders and Tom Perez, and the departures that you had.
Oh,
recently.
Keith Ellison.
Yeah, well,
or
okay,
ran
that's
themselves,
one name.
like
but there were several, and so my point is, you know, if you have the party that's in charge of raising funds kind of coming apart into threads for the moment, they'll pull it together at some point. It's been a long while since they have, though, because you had the Debbie Wasserman Schultz thing and the pushback against Bernie Sanders not making it fair game in the presidential election. And then you had Donna Brazile, who gave, just give away a debate question to one side. Give it to Hillary Clinton.
And what about the infrastructure? I mean, Tom Perez is in charge. How does he move forward?
For congressional elections, the DNC doesn't play as big a role as they do for a presidential election. So 2018, my point in saying that the individual candidates are raising money is because there is a lot of energy behind the party. It's just not going to the DNC because of the infrastructure
For some of those
problems.
reasons I just mentioned.
Because of the fact that I don't think Tom Perez is behaving in the right way I wish my party leader was.
Well, now they're not going to be able to rely on the deep pockets and fat wallets of the Hollywood left-leaning liberal scumbags now, which that has been a huge source of money for Democrats.
Both sides have their own
Now
scumbags.
they ought to do this, given what we know about some.
Well, I'm happy to get some more popcorn and sit back and watch. So it should be fun.
And none of them moved to Canada. Anyway, go on.
Exactly. President Trump invoking a hot-button issue in hopes of tipping the scales in a closely contested governor's race. The latest on the Virginia election and the Republican establishment candidate seizing on that issue. What it says about the president's influence on the Republican Party.
The Virginia governor's race is coming down to the wire. Former Republican National Committee Chairman Ed Gillespie is facing off against Democratic Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam. The vote is set for next month, and right now, an average of polls show the race in a virtual dead heat in a state Hillary Clinton won. Yesterday, President Trump upped his endorsement and tweeted, Ed Gillespie will turn the really bad Virginia economy numbers around and fast. Strong on crime. He might even save our great statues. /heritage! Gillespie, very much a GOP establishment figure, as you may know, has seized upon issues that have been winners for President Trump, including cracking down on illegal immigration and keeping up Virginia's Confederate statues. Here's a bit. Watch.
For governor, there's a clear choice. Ralph Northam wants to take down Virginia's Civil War monuments.
I will do everything that I can to remove the statues at the state level.
Ralph Northam will take our statues down. Ed Gillespie will preserve them.
I'm for keeping them up, and he's for taking them down.
Northam, the Democratic candidate, since backtracking, saying those decisions should be made at the local level. Maybe they did some focus group testing on that? I don't know. And why? The Daily Caller is summing up Gillespie's transformation like this, quote, the least Trumpian, most establishment-friendly candidate running as a populist nationalist shows the electoral power of Trumpism and how the old powers of the party have to radically adjust, end quote. Katie?
You can call it Trumpism or you can call it power to the people. In Virginia, we've had a very bad McAwful, is what I like to call him, governor.
You're a resident of Virginia.
And I'm a resident of Virginia, so full disclosure. McAwful. I really hope Gillespie wins, and considering how close he came in the Senate race to winning, I think he could actually make this happen. When the left goes so far as saying we have to tear down every single statue in the South that has any kind of controversy or history, people think that's insane. And you look at the crime in Virginia, MS-13 is actually a real problem there. There have been high-profile murders in local neighborhoods in a few different Virginia communities. People are concerned about that. So talking directly to what people care about, that's what Gillespie has done, and we'll see what happens in 2 weeks.
So a little Virginia tie there, and I know I have some here.
Born and raised.
I have the accent. She's got the accent.
And I'm from Southside Virginia, which is basically Virginia's two states. There's the north, which is full of a bunch of Democrat Yankees, and then there's the southern part, which is Trump country, which is, remember how Trump performed in the Western Virginia and coal country in like Buchanan County? That was one of his greatest wins during the primary season.
You mean the people that Hillary Clinton wanted to put out of work?
Yes, exactly. So Ed Gillespie is smartly touching on a lot of the issues that do matter to those Virginians, those conservative Virginians with those kinds of values, because McAuliffe has run the state for those people living north of Richmond, quite frankly, and that is the reason, in fact, that the economy isn't great in Virginia, because the federal funding that props up northern Virginia has been drying up as budget cuts have been put into place. And so Ed is walking a very fine line of trying to distance himself from President Trump, but also run on the Trump agenda. So far, it's working, as we see in the polls.
But not alienate Northern Virginia at the same time. And Ralph Northam, the Democratic candidate, is not particularly liberal. He won a primary against a very liberal primary candidate.
Katie's head's about to come off her shoulder.
He voted for George W. Bush
What's going
twice.
on?
He voted twice for George W. Bush, and he won
in a more sane time.
And he won a primary against a very liberal Democratic
candidate. He wasn't
candidate.
as far left as the Democrat Party is now. He voted for George Bush, but someone who wants to take down statues because they're somewhat offensive based on our history is very far left.
Yeah. You think I'm very far left?
Look, I agree with you. It's Trumpism. It shows the power of what Trump is doing. With so many rhinos in the Republican Party fighting against Trump, and you look at the election in that state, the last three elections all went to the Democrats, right? Obama, and Hillary won it.
Right.
But I think this is a carryover from what happened in the last election. People are fed up with big government. They're fed up with what's being said to them, what's being preached to them, and I think this guy's going to win.
This is also the brilliance of local politics, because people in many counties in the state, they have family members who fought for the Confederacy. They still have photos of those individuals, right or wrong, but they feel like that they don't like this left-wing whitewashing of the history. We can talk about what was wrong with it, but again, it's a bridge too far to rip down these statues or cover them.
The conversation about what was wrong with it would be a very lengthy conversation, but what you're saying is that it's part of the history that they don't
like. You're trying to wipe Washington and Jefferson and all those people as well.
Where does it stop? Right.
You know, they have to get rid rid of
I'll
everybody.
give you a
then.
list.
Wow,
Okay.
this is
Marie's
the
gonna
quietest
give us
that
a
we've seen
list.
Marie Harf.
National Socialism.
Really?
Oh, those are the Nazis, weren't they?
She's going to give us a list of the
Oh, my
appropriate
goodness
statues
gracious.
to
Right, I
take
mean,
down.
Germany doesn't keep up statues of Hitler. People can grasp their
Well,
past.
I love how the
and can get past
left
it.
calls presidents like Trump a Nazi.
I've
Nazi
never
means
used that term about
but you know
President
people
Trump.
have, and
Okay,
that means
well,
National Socialist. That would be the Democrat
I wouldn't
Party.
define the
So-
Democratic Party by the craziest people in it, just like we can't define the Republican Party by the craziest people in it. So.
Whew, it's getting hot up in here. Speaking of the president's power when it comes to cultural issues, NFL players taking a knee during the anthem, the president's been all over that controversy, and new Fox polling shows it looks like he is winning that battle bigly. The numbers and what's behind them next.
More Outnumbered in just a moment, but first we touch base with Harris Faulkner on what's coming up on Outnumbered Overtime in just a few moments.
All right, I'll take it away. A big win for President Trump when the GOP passed a budget to fast-track tax reform, but they do need the help of Republicans who voted no. Did you know there were 20 of them? One of them will join me next hour. And amid increased tension with North Korea, a new Fox poll finds worries about a nuclear attack on the United States have jumped dramatically. Are Americans right to be concerned? We'll look into details of that. Top of the hour. Dagan?
And we'll be there, Harris. Thank you so much. President Trump appears to be scoring big in his battle against NFL players taking a knee in protest during the playing of the national anthem. Just days ago, the president again tweeting on the issue, quote, 24 NFL players continued to kneel during the national anthem, showing total disrespect to our flag and country. No leadership in NFL. Exclamation point. And it appears the American public is responding. A new Fox News poll shows that the NFL's favorable rating has dropped 18 percentage points since October of 2013, particularly among, you guessed it, Republicans, where the drop was a 37% point drop. And even some Democrats bailing on the NFL, with support dropping 6 percentage points there. Justified, Kevin?
Well, you know, it's 2 years of this. To me, like, it's enough is enough. I mean, we get your point, all right? It's time to move on, and it shows the power in Trump's tweets. I mean, America reacts to what he puts out. He even tweeted about my movie, which opens today.
Did he really?
He tweeted,
oh, he saw it because he got a DVD.
He did, and I retweeted it for him. But, you know, you're talking 80 million followers in there. And so go to lettherbelikemovie.com. You can check out the
I want
tweet
to hear
there
about
as
your
well.
movie. What is it about?
No, we're going to talk about
Okay.
the next
Oh,
podcast.
yeah, okay,
Let's talk
All right,
about
Thursday night football.
Well, at least I got that in there, didn't I?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, you did. We will talk about it, Kevin. Kevin,
I see those
promise.
numbers going down, and I just see dollar signs. And the idea that the NFL is not treating this as a business decision is just baffling to me.
Americans are fed up with the anti-American rhetoric.
Roger
They're tired of
Goodell's
it.
response to this has been pathetic.
Yeah.
You know, the waffling on both sides of the issue, and they're gonna, you know, it's gonna hurt in the pocketbook where Americans feel they have some power. So they can live with the consequences of that at the NFL.
The ratings are down. You're a football fan. They're down 5.1% from a year ago, and off almost 19% from the 18.4 million viewers during the same period in 2015. What were you going to say?
No, I got
you had your finger up.
I'm a big Viking fan. I was back home in Minnesota just 2 weeks ago, and it was the Vikings against the Packers, and
Go
I watched.
Packers.
Nobody took a knee at that game, and I was pretty impressed.
Well, the NFL's in a tough place here, though, because they do have a number of players. I mean, you say you've made your point, move on. These players feel like we aren't having a conversation as a country about.
But isn't there a better place to do that? Like coming on your show?
Then let's do
Get
it.
an NFL kneeler right here.
You know where you do that?
But
You go to the inner cities and you have a press conference.
I'm not saying
and you say, we need better schools.
This
Shouldn't there be kneeling for the black-on-blacks killings in Chicago that nobody pays attention to? I mean, come on.
A lot of people pay attention, by the way, to what's happening in Chicago. My point was the players, the NFL has to care about their players, right?
Sure.
These are players who are the ones who get them wins, who make the money, who score touchdowns on Sundays. So the NFL cannot just say, I don't care what you guys think or what you're doing. You have to stand. The NFL's walking a fine line.
It's 2 years of this now.
Well, and I will.
And they're still not having it. Well, I
Then
don't.
have the discussion. Can't they find a place to have the discussion?
Well, I think the NFL is trying to make that discussion happen. President Trump is trying to make the discussion about patriotism. These players are trying to say, we are very patriotic. We want to talk about police violence in this country.
The initial group of players, it was less than a dozen, right? It was about like six players who were protesting police brutality, the treatment of black Americans, black men, but it turned into an anti-Trump protest. That's exactly what happened, because he said these guys need to get fired, and it became this war of words. And I would argue that these players that keep kneeling are just playing into, they're giving into President Trump.
Well,
they're giving him what he wants.
Should not have called them SOBs. Okay, that definitely upped the ante of the conversation. You shouldn't have done that.
No debate
However,
from me on that.
We should give the NFL credit for when Roger Goodell announced his non-announcement about what they're going to do about this. He did talk about how they're working with the NYPD to discuss very specifically these issues of police brutality. But if the players are really interested in that being their issue, they have all the power in the world to go to Oakland, to go to Chicago, to go to the Bronx,
they can get
to go
on
to Queens,
any platform they want.
and have a press conference with the police and say, this is what we don't like about what you're doing. Let's talk about how we can move forward on this issue.
And by the way, if the bottom line of the NFL gets hurt, the bottom line of the teams get hurt, it hurts player salaries, and maybe then they'll all stand. Money usually talks. More outnumbered in just a moment.